am Carol Anne Riddell, and welcome to Book It. As we close out our season, we are taking a look back at two interviews we loved from recent months. Both of them touch on love. We start with best-selling author and CUNY alum Frederick Joseph, who sat down with us to chat about his debut collection of poetry, We Alive Beloved. Fred, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
So your latest book is a collection of poetry. It is called We Alive Beloved. It's your debut collection of poetry, I should add.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it. I read the whole thing in one sitting.
Really?
I sure did, yes, absolutely. You cover a lot of topics in your poems, from racism to relationships to your dog.
Right.
What made you turn to poetry for this book? How did that come about?
So it's interesting. I don't know if I necessarily turned to poetry. I think that poetry's always been sort of the pillar of my work, right? There's a certain lyricism and prose I try to bring to essays and even like posts on social media because I started out as a poet, right? My grandmother taught me how to write, and it's a funny story. I was listening to rap as a kid, as kids do, and she's like, oh, this is poetry. And, me being 8 years old, like, you don't know what you're talking about, and so she's like, no, like, listen to the cadence, listen to the lyrics. And so she introduced me to Langston Hughes and Gwendolyn Brooks. And I'm like, this is kind of cool, right? So I started writing poetry very young, about 9 years old. So I always knew at some point I wanted to publish a collection. I just didn't know I would ever get to actually do it.
Yeah, and I read somewhere you said that poetry was the gift that your grandmother gave you.
Yes. Yeah. Poetry is, my grandmother gave me the gift of word. That is the magic that was her, the ability to not just craft a sentence, but to sort of have a vision of how I sort of try to string things together to make certain things happen.
One of the poems in the book has gotten a lot of attention, including national attention. It is called We Cry Together. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so We Cry Together was sort of my reflection on finding out that my wife had miscarried. I wanted to honor that for all the families and people who have been through that, and sit in that moment a bit, right? Because I do think that the trials and tribulations of trying to become parents don't necessarily get talked about enough, and that is such a heartbreak. And obviously we have poems about heartbreak in various capacities, but I don't know that we have that as much, especially from a man's point of view, right? I really wanted to sort of lean into the tenderness and the humanity to help also like dismantle, toxic masculinity a little bit, right? Where it's okay to be devastated, right? And to honor that devastation, whether in word or tears or music or, whatever you're feeling at the time. So, that's what that poem was.
And we'd love to have you read it for us, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. From the hallway, I hear her sobbing, an ocean devouring her smile. My knuckles meet the steel door of a sterile hospital room, attempting to punch away our misfortune until I can replace it with something she actually deserves. From all of the IVF shots, the nights we debated over names, the anxiety attacks about money, and the moments we pinched ourselves at the idea of being chosen by Frederick Joseph. How do you stitch a wound living in the syllables of a name never called? There is nothing to say when spun into a vortex of unspeakable loss. We spend weeks huddled around grief like a campfire, telling silent ghost stories about the people we stopped being just days before. Nurturing a flame so small it could be mistaken for hope. In the most somber hours when the world took its deepest breath, I sat beside her, staring at the slight crescent of her unhoused belly. For so long, I swore I heard a heartbeat, but it was actually planets collapsing in the cavities of my chest. And I wondered, how are we going to survive this? And in time, my question was answered. Together.
It's so moving. It's so visceral.
Thank you.
Really, it's beautifully done.
I appreciate that.
I have to ask, how are you and your wife doing now? Because I know it's such a heartbreak.
So this was now 2 years ago. Time is interesting. Time does heal, but you're never not sitting with things like that, right? And I think so much is happening in society, in our personal lives, that if I'm transparent, it sort of feels like a place that you sit somewhere and you go back to it occasionally.
Sure.
And you move on to the other things that you're trying to tackle, but it doesn't dissipate. We just, you hear something or see something, you'll go there for a moment and then you'll close that door and you'll come back at some point.
I think loss is like that.
Yeah.
I read something you said, Fred. You said that these poems reveal pieces of your soul.
Yeah.
And that struck me because I wondered, was it intimidating or a little scary to be that personal on the page, at least at first?
Yeah, my first book was about my experiences with racism as a 13-year-old and whatnot. So I think that was the most vulnerable I had ever been. I kind of out the gate jumped right into vulnerability, but this was a different level for me, right? This was not, this wasn't a book that was trying to help people be better or,
Yes.
Things of that nature. It was just me. And, I felt bare at points, especially when you're reading in front of, I've done events at Lincoln Center and things like that. And, you're like, oh, there's 300 people here reading about, me and my mom or me and my wife. And but it's a beautiful thing because you can see in people's eyes that they relate.
That they connect, right?
Right, and you feel less alone for that.
So, Fred, you mentioned your first book. We mentioned before that you've written a number of books. The first book was The Black Friend on Being a Better White Person. It's described as a young adult book, although it seems to me that it's a book for every age.
I agree.
And you've said that you wrote the book, or you realized you needed to write the book after something that happened on the subway.
Yes, I was actually on the subway. This was probably 2018, and it's not much different from the things that happen on a regular basis, sadly. I was sitting down, and this woman, as I'm sitting there, she just and I'm in a full suit heading to the office. This is when I worked in marketing still. She had a purse, and first she tucked her purse away from me, and then she looked at me, and I put my headphones on, I'm listening to music, and there was a seat on the whole other side of the train. She looks at me and just gets up and is shaking and moves at the idea of me as a black person sitting next to this, white woman frightened her beyond belief. And so I remember posting about it on Twitter because, Twitter at the time was the town square. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this racism. And you had thousands of black and brown people who were like, yeah, I hate when that happens, and it happens to me constantly, so on and so forth. And thousands of white people saying, how is that racist? What was racist about this? I don't get it. What are you talking about? And I'm like, oh my God, yeah, we're having conversations about systems and history and, sort of institutional racism, but interpersonal racism and how we show up for our neighbors and on our daily basis, we're not really talking about that, right?
Yes.
And so I was like,
it's such a good point.
Right, and I was just, I'll do it, I'll do it, but especially because by the time we get to a certain age, sadly, people stop listening as much, right? So I'm like, if I can reach that woman on the train when she's 12 or 13 years old, maybe this doesn't happen. So. Yeah.
And one of the things you say in the book is that there are two sayings that pretty much every person of color hears at some point, and they are, why does everything have to be about race, and I don't see color? And you argue very effectively in the book as to why those concepts, those sayings, are very much part of the problem.
Right.
I agree with you.
Right.
But tell us a little bit more in detail why.
I mean, the reality of it is when people say something like, I don't see race is one of the pillars of this nation, right? Race is one of the pillars of most societies. And to say that you don't see race doesn't absolve anyone but yourself of the things happening in relation to race, right? Mm-hmm. It'd be no different than right now if you said, I don't feel comfortable jogging in Central Park at night. And I'm like, well, I don't see sex, and therefore I don't understand what you're saying, right? I have to better show up for you as a friend, if I'm trying to be an ally or accomplice to women, understand why it is that you might feel unsafe. Because if I can understand that, then I can help facilitate a potential world where you don't have to feel that way. Mm-hmm. But if I refuse to see it, the only person I'm helping is myself. You still have the same issue, right? Yes. And then as far as the, why does everything have to be about race? I mean, it's a simple answer because everything is sadly about race, right? Race was created so that everything could be about race. The concept of race is actually a fairly new concept in history, right? Race was actually literally created to delineate who is and who isn't human at first, right? And who's worth and isn't worth being owned or, having property and able to vote and things of this nature. And so to try to suddenly snap your finger and say that this isn't—
It doesn't exist.
Exactly, that our society isn't based on this, again, it doesn't benefit anyone but you, right? To have the honest conversations and lean into the uncomfortability of the realities of our world is how we actually begin to change our world.
Yep. And The Black Friend became a bestseller.
Yeah, The Black Friend became an instant New York Times bestseller, out the gate.
Exciting.
Yeah.
So I want to switch gears for a moment because we should mention that you are part of our CUNY family.
Yes.
You are a Hunter grad. So how did those years influence your work, your writing?
Yeah, so it's so funny. So I'm a Hunter grad. I was actually on Hunter's student government, and I actually was a night school kid. I worked during the day, and so I was in my 20s going to school at night. And I actually felt like it influenced my time there in a beautiful way because I got to really appreciate being at Hunter. I wasn't just sort of zipping through and being young. I was like in classes with people who were in their 40s and 50s, and I'm 20, 19, and the perspective that I'm getting is just wonderful. And I think it actually influenced my writing a great deal because it helped teach me to slow down. Right?
Yeah.
I think when you're young, not everyone's the same, but a lot of people when you're young, everything is, I gotta get to this, I gotta do that, I wanna do this, fast, and then—
We're all trying to grow up so quickly, right? And then you grow up and you're thinking—
Right, and if you do it right, the older you get, the more pensive you become, right? And so spending time in class, especially, I study political science, so we're in classes ruminating on the big issues of the world and our, our society, and the person next to me is 50 years old, and I'm 20, and we're just in conversation about everything.
So one other aspect of your career I want to touch on. So you're also a marketing expert. You were in Forbes 30 Under 30, right? For marketing and advertising. This is 2019, do I have that right? But you also sort of famously started the Black Panther Challenge.
Yeah.
So can you tell us about that quickly?
Yeah, so the Black Panther Challenge was this effort to take children who didn't necessarily have the resources to see Black Panther in movie theaters to see the film, right? It was a simple concept, and it came out of this moment with my younger brother, who's significantly older now, but he was at the time, I believe, 7 or 8 years old, and he saw the trailer for Black Panther, and he's just like enamored. And
Yeah.
like, okay.
We are home. My son, it is your time.
I'll obviously take him to see it, but I thought about, what about the kids who aren't able to see it?
Can't go, right.
And so, I just decided to use some of my marketing muscle to create a GoFundMe campaign and reached out to, I was probably very annoying, I was on Twitter reaching out to Chelsea Clinton and all these famous people, and it gained some traction, a little notoriety, and then one night I wake up and they're like, hey, so Chelsea Clinton shared it along with a few other celebrities, and it is literally everywhere now. So it actually became the largest GoFundMe in history based on the amount of campaigns that are created globally. So what started out trying to take 100 kids to see the film, we ended up taking 700,000 around the world to see Black Panther for free.
It's just remarkable.
Yeah.
Wow. And you ended up on the Ellen DeGeneres show. I mean, it really just blew up.
And to date, we've actually raised now close to $42,000.
$42,000.
Yeah, it absolutely blew up, and I think it sort of launched my career because, I always have to speak his name in any room that I'm in. Chadwick Boseman reached out to me as this was all happening, the late dear Chadwick Boseman, and asked me, well, besides, this and, community organizing, what do you do? I'm like, well, like at that point, like the Black Panther's asking you what you do. So I'm like, well, I'm a writer. I write on the side, and I hadn't been published or anything like that. He's like, okay, send me something. I was like, okay. Next thing I know, HuffPo had reached out, hey, you want to write about, representation? And then things kind of snowballed from there.
That's really exciting.
Yeah.
That's really good. See, all out of a good deed as well.
Right.
Fred, I'd like to end with another one of your poems, if you would read it. I just was so moved by the poem that you wrote for your wife. It's called In Another Life.
Yes. When my pulse fades, I'll chase the silhouette of you swaying to music, knowing our song is next to play. And if I can no longer see or hear, I'll follow the scent of your perfume, knowing the sweetness of your skin. Through the doors where time is hushed, I'll search for the trail of your laughter, tracing it back to the moment we met, when I first held the horizon line of your hands, rested in the sanctuary of your voice. When my breath grows thin, find me waiting for you on a street, lined with magnolias, unchanged in essence, and yet new. You'll know it's me as you walk closer. Listen for the sound of my heart skipping a beat.
That is just lovely. It just choked me up. It's really, I have to ask, did she just love it?
I don't think she's to this day sort of used to sort of the public side of things. So she loves it. But the fact that occasionally I've had to read it to her in front of like hundreds of people.
Yes.
Yeah. She loves it.
It's a moment. It's a moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah.
Fred, thank you so much for all this time. Gosh, it was such a pleasure.
Thank you for
to be
having
able to
me.
chat with you.
Thank you.
Now we head to the podcast studio. Isabel Ortiz spoke with Abraham Chang, author of 888 Love and the Divine Burden of Numbers.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Breaking Books. I'm Isabel Ortiz, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by author Abraham Chang to discuss his debut novel, 888 Love and the Divine Burden of Numbers. Hi Abraham, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Isabel. The pleasure and the privilege is mine. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to dive into this book and to hear you talk about it because, yes, it's 888 Love and the Divine Burden of Numbers, but this book was more than just a story about love. It was more than just a romance novel. You talked about identity, culture, and fate, and what pulls us in certain directions. So I would love if you can tell us a little bit about the book and the main character, Young.
Sure. I would describe 888 Love as a literary love story. It's a coming-of-age tale. It's set in the 80s and 90s New York City, and it has a primarily Asian-American cast of characters. So it deals with these themes of mental health and spiritual health, deals with nature versus nurture, free will versus destiny. And the shorthand I have for the pop culture geeks like you and me is that this book is more Breakfast Club than Joy Luck Club. Young, the main character, he deals with a lot of his mental health issues by kind of self-prescribing, and he's using these cultural and also pop cultural references that inform this system of numerology and patterns and systems that he relies on to help him make these decisions, like big and large and small and, minuscule. All through his life, he's been told by his uncle, with some unhinged kind of advice from his family, that there's certain things that you do, certain things you can expect. And one of the pieces of advice his uncle gives him is, remember, you have 7 great loves in your life, and that's it. So make the most of it and don't blow it. Mm-hmm. So it's his sophomore year, he's studying, and he meets this girl, Erina. And, by his count, she's number 6. But if she's number 6 in a line of only 7, what does that mean for me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there is a huge coming-of-age aspect to this novel. You touched on that. Mm-hmm. And we see Young really take a look back on his formative years from like when he was in the 5th grade all the way up until he's in high school and in college. So what was that like for you really to have this character be in the present moment but then have to write this whole backstory? Mm-hmm. Are you pulling on things from your own youth when you are writing these flashbacks? Because I guess in a way you have to, it's like you're trying to be kind to your younger self.
Anytime we come into a piece of fiction or piece of art, we always wonder, is the creator inserting themselves into that art? And, I wanted to kind of give the reader a little bit of, a look behind the curtain of, is this author really drawing from real life? How much of this is fiction? How much of this is inspired? I took elements from my elementary school, my junior high school, my beloved Stuyvesant High School, my college years at NYU, but you're telling the truth and you're telling it slant.
Young is a young person in New York City with these like Western ideas, and then he's going home to these kind of Eastern traditional ideas with his family because he comes from a Chinese background. So what was that like when you were writing that? Because I know that you're bringing elements of your own culture into it as well.
Right. So I think a lot of the struggle with people who are first gen or immigrants is that there's this push and pull of, am I X enough or am I American? Or am I X/Y American? Everything hyphenate, hyphenate, hyphenate. And in the end, it's like every person is going to have this dossier on them of, here's this box that I'm checking off of all the things that make me who I am. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to understand that my mom has this background, this point of view, and it's part of who she was coming to the States. And she brings that baggage with her, and what she passes down to the future generations, her children, it's incalculable because, Young might take these certain aspects from his mom and process it differently than his baby sister will in the future. Mm-hmm. But in the end, they have to understand that every person's experience, it comes with so many years, and it comes with a lineage, and a lot of that is nature versus nurture.
Young uses numerology in almost every aspect, big decisions, small decisions, and it can be like 888, like the title. That's a great number. 4 is bad. 1, great, right? So what was that like for you to take that part of because I understand it's a part of Chinese culture. What was that like for you to write that in this book and make it such a big part of the story?
So again, this is pulling from, different aspects of my life, my personal kind of behavior, and kind of amplifying it a little bit. Because I think as any Chinese person and a lot of, people from the Asian backgrounds will understand that 8 is a very lucky number. If you see an 8's on a license plate on a vanity plate, chances are it's a Chinese person. So all of these numbers are kind of filtered in through that cultural connection and that numerology that you're raised when you're, hey, it's just Lunar New Year. There's 8s everywhere. There's red envelopes, and all these things that the main character Young is probably seeing from his family. But then he's watching these movies, watching, reading Time Life books, and watching. Listening to music and being exposed to Western culture, who's teaching him, well, here's all these lucky and unlucky numbers from this side of the world. So he's putting those two sides of him together, and with his own kind of OCD, he latches onto both sides and says, well, since I'm Asian American and Chinese American, and this is part of my culture and this is my other culture, if I put them all together, doesn't that mean it's even more lucky and even more guidance?
Young, like you mentioned, he sticks very strict to this concept of numerology. But then he meets Erina, and that kind of, his world kind of opens up, and it becomes a little bit chaotic because Erina does not follow any kind of strict rule. She's very open. She's very go with the flow. So I wanted to know, what was it like for you to write her as a character? Because there is this such a stark contrast between the two.
So Erina as a character, again, 80s and 90s film tropes. Like if you know about film, when you are first introduced to Erina, she fits the bill of the manic pixie dream girl, and you are going to assume something that she repeats throughout the book, certain things about her. So I'm hoping people, mild spoilers, will read the book and kind of see her in a different light from the beginning and the end as she develops and you get to know her. And I think as Young gets to know her, because he puts a lot of emphasis on how amazing she is, how she's never met anybody like her. I wanted people to kind of understand that you need to give her a little grace and give her a little bit of room to breathe, and understand that first impressions aren't always the same as the lasting impressions.
I wonder, this is your debut novel. Are you working on anything now?
Yes, right now, you caught me at a very good time because I'm probably a chapter and a half away from finishing writing my book 2 ending. And, you're getting a scoop here. So, what I'm allowed to say is it's an another literary love story, but it's set in the 2000s. It's not a sequel. There's some similar stuff in there. There might be some Easter eggs, but it's a completely different kind of story. But, you know, I can't stop writing about destiny and fate and what that means. I can't stop writing about what it means to love and be loved.
Well, I am very excited, and I will be definitely keep an eye out for when that comes out. And maybe, who knows, maybe we'll have you back to talk about that.
Please.
But, yes, so thank you so much for being here today. It was a pleasure getting to speak to you.
Thank you so much, Isabel. You've been great.
We always love Linda Stasi, but she definitely does not always love the books she reads. Here are a couple of her recent reviews from Uncensored.
Trust by Hernan Diaz is a Rashomon-structured telling of the 1929 Wall Street crash and one greedy, boring man who helped cause it. Trust is a novel, an autobiography, a memoir, and a private diary, or 4 conflicting accounts of the same story. In this case, the first book in a book is a fictionalized novel based on the life of another fictionalized character, financier Andrew Bevel, and his schizophrenic wife, Mildred. The second book within a book is Bevel's attempt to correct the novel by hiring a ghostwriter to script what he says is the true story. The third part, written from the perspective of the ghostwriter, is different again. The fourth part is Mildred's diary, which differs from all the other accounts. Got it? Good, because really, I didn't. And at 400 and something pages, 6 trillion glorious reviews, and 1 Pulitzer later, I still had a hell of a time getting through it. However, like most overly lauded books, this one, thank God, has punctuation. It is also one of Barack Obama's favorite books, but frankly, not one of mine. Maybe that's another reason I never became president. Against my better judgment, I bought Hillbilly Elegy, which was once again a bestseller. Sheesh, that's $16 in a week of my life I'll never get back. In the book, J.D. Vance whines about his poor childhood, and meantime, his mother and one of her many husbands made over $100,000. They lived in a house with a swimming pool and had new cars. Wah, wah, wah. This is a guy who denigrates women without children, and yet the whole book is about what a terrible mother his own mother was, what with her addictions to drugs and men. The woman got married more than most of us get manicured, went on benders, and J.D. often lived with his grandparents. He also says that women should stay in abusive marriages, but writes that his beloved grandparents, Mamaw and Pawpaw, lived separately due to abuse. Between the bad writing and the whining, Hillbilly Elegy should have been titled Hillbilly Bullcrap. For Uncensored, I'm Linda Stasi.
That wraps up another chapter for us. Thanks so much for joining us. A quick reminder to download our CUNY TV app so you can watch on the go and check out our social media. We'd love to hear from you. We'll be back in September with an all-new season of Book It. I'm Carol Anne Riddell. See you then.